Right now, Alan K. Stout is a long-time writer, loves rock and roll, lives in northeastern Pennsylvania, is a huge fan of many bands and artists. And Alan, you had the opportunity to actually talk to David Bowie. So I'm glad you called to talk about what that must have been like. Kind of nerve-wracking or not? And good morning.
Well, good morning, Sue, and thank you for doing the nice tribute to him and his music this morning on your program. Yeah, it was. I mean, the thing about he played Montage in 2004. He kicked off the season that year. I remember it was an unusual kickoff because they usually start at the shows up there maybe the middle of June when it got a little warmer up on the top of the mountain. And that year, I think that show was actually maybe before Memorial Day. It was late May.
It was. It was May. I put the ticket stub up this morning. I think it was May 27th, 2004.
Yeah, so it was a little bit earlier than we usually got shows rolling up there, and that sort of set the precedent because they've done that ever since then now.
Mm-hmm.
But I wasn't sure what I would get with him. Just watching the videos, and I never really had seen him do a lengthy interview on television before or anything, and so I just assumed he might be a little distant or aloof, and not at all. He was calling on the phone from Pittsburgh. He was on tour. He was on the tour bus, and he was absolutely delightful. We laughed a lot. He had a new album out called Reality, and he had been a New Yorker for quite some time, and so this was only 3 years after 9/11. So we talked a little bit about that in the interview. Just a very engaging guy, funny. We laughed quite a bit, much lighter and much more engaged than I thought he would have been.
Did you have a hard time thinking about the questions you might ask him, Alan?
No. I mean, at that point, I had been interviewing people for a long time already, even by then, and I knew I wanted to talk about his new album and his tour, and I did want to talk to him about his career going back, obviously, to the 70s, and so I sort of started off with the new album and the new tour, and then worked our way back, which was always the way I did it with artists, because I think they appreciated that, talk about the new thing first. But it was funny. There was one moment when I was about to call him a chameleon, and he said, "Don't you say it, don't you say it." And I said it, and then we both just burst out laughing. And I have that up on that whole interview up on my Music on the Menu Facebook page this morning if fans want to listen to it. It's about maybe 18 minutes long, and we just had a great conversation. I remember a couple of things that I'm thinking back now that he has passed. I remember complimenting him on his singing voice because everybody talks about him as a performer and as a songwriter and as an innovator. But when I remember listening to, he had the comeback in the early 80s with Let's Dance and Modern Love, I remember thinking, man, this guy can really sing. He can really put it out there. And it was nice to talk to him about that.
And then you got to meet him.
I did. So what happened was, in the newspaper business, they call these shows advances. So you usually do the interview on the phone a week or two before the artist comes to town, and then the story runs in the paper a few days before the show. It's sort of, help promote the show and build excitement about it. And frankly, that's why the artists do them.
Right.
It helps sell some tickets. And then, he came to town for that show, and I went backstage, and I handed him a copy of the story, and he was delightful again. A friend of mine went with me. She was a big fan. I mean, he gave her a big hug, she leapt right into his arms. He was laughing, smiling. Of course, I brought a copy for him to keep for himself, and then he signed one for me and posed for a couple of pictures, and could not have been any nicer.
What a great memory. Aren't you lucky?
I am. And, Sue, what's interesting about that is I remember, standing right next to him. I think he was 54 years old at the time. I could not get over how young he looked and what great shape he was in. But he had a heart attack about 2 weeks after that show. Mm-hmm. And the rest of that show was that tour was canceled, I believe, or postponed for quite a while. And so he's had some medical issues for some time. I did not know he had cancer. I don't think any of us did.
Well, I'll tell you what, that was a killer set list that he did up there at Montage with the Pixies and Sister Midnight and Pablo Picasso, Under Pressure, Station to Station.
I pulled out my old review from that concert this morning. I put that up on the Facebook page as well if anybody wants to walk down memory lane. Another interesting David Bowie story, and you probably know this because you're such a big fan, is outside of obviously what he did with pop music, his performance with Bing Crosby on the Bing Crosby Christmas special in 1977. That was actually filmed in the summer, and so I think in, they do that a lot with these Christmas shows. They film them in the fall or summer, then they air them at Christmas time. Bing Crosby had actually passed by the time it aired.
Wow.
But they had never met until maybe an hour or two before they did that Little Drummer Boy.
Yeah, it's an odd situation. It's a weird kind of juxtaposition of ours. Alan, we have to run because we have a guest coming up, but I appreciate you appearing today, and I put your Facebook story about David Bowie up on our Facebook page, so thanks a lot.
Thanks, Sue. Thanks for what you're doing this morning and playing the tunes.
Sure thing.